So we can distinguish between two kinds of evidence, a priori and a posteriori. A priori evidence is evidence that we have independently or prior to our experience. So you'll usually find examples of this in math. So if you want to know why 5 plus 7 is 12, you begin with some basic axioms about numbers, and you do a little bit of logic, and you prove that 5 plus 7 is 12. What you don't do is you don't go out and do a bunch of measurements in the world to figure out that 5 plus 7 is 12. Now, a posteriori evidence is evidence that we have as a result of experience in the world, right? It's posterior to or after our interactions with the world. So when we think of scientific investigation, that's typically a posteriori, like 99% of the time, roughly. So if you want to know why leaves are green, we would do some research into, the biology of leaves and trees, and you'd learn a bit about photosynthesis and chlorophyll, and that would give you the story for why leaves are green. So all of that would be a posteriori. Now, the tricky part in philosophy is trying to figure out what kind of evidence is relevant for our questions. So if we're thinking about whether or not people have free will, do we rely on a priori evidence, or do we rely on a posteriori evidence? So in other words, do we depend on evidence that we have prior to our experience, perhaps the analysis of our concepts, or do we look around the world and observe that people act freely? Now, the first one, the a priori, a philosopher, Immanuel Kant, argued that this is how we infer that people are free, right? That freedom is a necessary presupposition. It's a necessary condition for us to act morally. And so it can't be determined a posteriori whether or not we're free. Now, that's not the consensus view among philosophers. There's a lot of sort of argument back and forth about this, but that's the general flavor. What we want to do in philosophy is figure out, in part, or part of what we do, is what kinds of evidence are appropriate for what kinds of questions. So when you're thinking about free will and determinism, for example, do you rely on evidence that we get independently of our experience, right? That we just sort of think about the concept of freedom? Or do you have to go about observing in the world and figure out that way that people are free?